Hello lovely people. I decided to do another back to basics video about aiming the speakers in your system because constantly I keep finding people debating online and asking the same question. Should I aim my mid bass towards me? Should I aim my mid ranges? Should I aim my tweeters? Hopefully in this video I will be able to answer all of those questions. So since this video is very back to basics, we're not gonna go into any graphs, any formulas, any math. I'm gonna show you only a few numbers, but everything else is gonna be super basic, so literally anyone could understand it. In this video, I will answer the question, should you aim your individual speakers? When should you aim them? And when just don't care about it? Now, the fact is that we are in a car. In a car, we don't really have optimal or perfect locations for our speakers. Usually, we have 6.5, 6x9s, or 8-inch mid-bass drivers in the doors. Maybe sometimes we do have something in the dash. I do have custom-made pods for my mid-ranges. Sometimes this mid-range is going to be in the door panel as well. And we do have our tweeters. Sometimes they're in the sail panel, sometimes in the dash, sometimes in the door. Due to these locations, especially on the driver's side, what we have is a situation where anything that's being mounted on this door is going to be very off axis from us. So this is the first back to basics term, off axis and on axis. What is that? If we take any kind of speaker and we install it in a way that it's looking at us like this. So for example, in the door, in the dash, or in that door, this is off axis. Axis is a line that's going through the magnet, through the desk cap and straight. If a speaker is looking directly at you, this is going to be on axis. And then we have degrees of inclination, if you will. So 90 degree off axis, 45, 30, and so on and so on. Now, the problem with all of these axes, whatever, is that speakers are playing different frequencies differently. The second term that we're going to touch is speaker beaming frequency. When speakers, any kind of speakers, reproduce sound, the lower frequencies are what we call omnidirectional. That means that even if a speaker is aimed that way, lower frequencies are going literally everywhere. Because if you have any kind of speaker in a box, a subwoofer or a tower or a bookshelf, even if the speaker is not looking at you, even if you are behind the speaker, you can still hear some bass coming from it, because the bass is literally just wraps around and it doesn't care where the speaker is aimed. Only when you come in front of the speaker, you can start hearing the higher frequencies. So speakers are beaming. The easiest way to visualize this is imagine a speaker producing sound as a torch lighting things up. So if I'm gonna enable this and I'm gonna put you like this, you can see that this torch being far away, it illuminates a big area. But if I'm going closer and closer to the surface, that pattern is getting smaller and smaller. Exactly the same happens with a speaker. Low frequencies are being reproduced like this. They go everywhere. The higher the frequency the speaker reproduces, the narrower the dispersion is, and very high frequencies are reproduced in a very narrow area. So if you take, for example, a 6.5-inch driver, it's gonna play 50, 60 hertz, 40 hertz all the way around. So it doesn't matter how you put it, you will hear bass coming from it. However, if you want to hear high frequencies coming from this driver, you have to aim it, because the high frequencies are going to be like a laser beam going straight on axis from the driver. Different drivers, depending on the size, will have a different beaming frequency. Now this is the only time that I'm going to show you this, and there are some numbers, but the only thing you have to kind of realize is this is the polar pattern, and this is when the speaker is totally and absolutely beaming. This is basically when it starts to beam already. So if we have a 6.5-inch driver like this, which is this one, 6.1, anything above like 1.5, 2 kilohertz, it's already starting to beam. And higher frequencies such as like 4.5, it's like a laser beam. So if you have this driver mounted in a door like this, it's gonna be 45, 50, 60 degree off axis to you. I'm just gonna put it like this so you could imagine how it looks like, yeah? When a speaker is aimed like this towards the side, that means that all the frequencies like below 1K, everything lower is gonna be omnidirectional. That means that this speaker playing lower frequencies, it doesn't care where it is aimed at. However, the high frequencies, for example, 5 kilohertz, is gonna go straight to my leg and it's not gonna reach my ears. And this is where aiming comes into play. By having speaker like this, you cannot hear 5 kilohertz. If you aim that speaker towards you on axis, you will be able to hear that 5 kilohertz. Exactly the same situation is with the smaller drivers. So for example, if we take this is a 3-inch driver, and we're gonna have a look at this graph. 3-inch starts to beam about 3 kilohertz. Anything below 3 kilohertz is playing omnidirectionally. That means that if I'm gonna have this mounted in the dash like that one, that is a 4-inch. So that 4-inch all the way up to about 2 kilohertz is gonna play omnidirectionally. That means all the frequencies up to 2 kilohertz are gonna go everywhere and they will reach my ears. Now, if I would want to have 5, 6, 7 kilohertz playing from that speaker and reaching my ears, that is already starting to beam. That means that I would need to tilt that speaker. And for the tweeters, it's exactly the same. Tweeters have different sizes as well. So for example, this is a bigger tweeter, you can see, and this compared to that one is much smaller. So the smaller tweeter will be omnidirectional at a higher frequency. So for example, 1.5 and 1 inch, while the bigger one, which is this SB Acoustics, will be omnidirectional up to like 6 kilohertz. The smaller one, that one, is gonna be omnidirectional up to 9 kilohertz. So if you have this speaker mounted 90 degree off axis like that, it will play potentially up to 9 or even 10 kilohertz. Whereas if you put a bigger speaker off axis like this will play and reach your ears only up to like 6 or 7 kilohertz. So the smaller the driver, the more frequencies can be played omnidirectionally. And basically that means that depending on your crossover points, what you want your driver to play, sometimes you can get away with a driver being totally off axis compared to the listening position. And sometimes you do need to aim the driver. So let's talk about situations in which you have to aim and in which you don't. And again, we're not going to talk about numbers. I'm just going to tell you. 6.5-inch mid-bass driver in the doors, if it's in a 3-way system, it doesn't have to be aimed. Any potential aiming towards the driver, towards the listening position, will not gain you anything. It's not going to be of any benefit. However, if it's in a 2-way system and 6.5-inch driver needs to play up to 3, 4, 5 kilohertz to meet the tweeter, you need to aim it towards you to get a better response from it. Because if it's going to be off axis, it will start to roll off at 1.5, 2 kilohertz, and the tweeter is not going to reach it. That's why if it's a 2-way system, I always recommend to pair a 6.5 with a small mid-range wideband that can play all the way up. Now, mid-ranges. If you have 3 or 4-inch mid-range like that one, and it's playing only mid-range frequencies from, let's say, 300 hertz up to 3, 4 kilohertz or 5 kilohertz, you don't have to aim it. It can be in your pillar like that off axis and it's gonna be fine. Exactly the same with that with 4-inch. If I'm gonna cross it to the tweeter at 3-4 kilohertz, it can be off axis and there will be nothing wrong with that. However, if you want your 3-inch or 4-inch or a 2-inch driver to play all the way up to 20 kilohertz, that means you want to have it full range, like to pair a 6.5 with a 3-inch, then you need to aim it towards you, because a 3-inch starts beaming at 4.5. At 9K it's already beaming, so if you're gonna aim it off axis, you are not gonna have that top end above 10K. If you want that, you have to aim it. So again, in a 3-way, if it plays as a dedicated mid-range, it can be off axis and it's fine. If it's your wideband, you have to aim it towards you. Now, coming to the tweeters, no matter how small they are, it is always best to aim them. Even the smallest 1-inch tweeter will play kinda omnidirectional up to 10, 13, maybe 14K. But if you want that very, very top end, because we people hear with normal hearing up to 16 kilohertz. To hear 16 kilohertz, you need to have that tweeter on axis. If you're gonna have it off axis, it's gonna start to roll off at 13, 14K, and you will be missing that very, very, very top end that some people call air or sparkle. So tweeters are always best to be aimed on axis towards the listener. Now, one thing you probably heard about aiming tweeters and mid-ranges is that a lot of people say that if you want the best imaging for the passenger and for the driver, you have to aim the tweeter somewhere in the middle, like in between the seats. Some people aim it here, some people aim it towards the C-pillar. Imaging wise, you will not get good image between left and right seat just because of the time alignment. You can get kinda okay-ish frequency response, meaning that for both the passenger and the driver, the frequency response can be very similar. However, in order to do that, you are aiming the driver not directly towards the listener. That means the listener will be missing that very, very top end. So it is a compromise. You're kind of making it better for both seats, but at the same time worse for the listener. Because if you have a tweeter that is aimed a little bit off axis, like in between the seats, and then you want to hear that very, very top end, that air, that sparkle, you will need to use EQ and boost those top end frequencies. However, if you aim it just a little bit towards you, you will get those higher frequencies for free with no EQ. Obviously, if the tweeter is capable of reproducing those frequencies. Now, if we're talking about the opposite side of the spectrum, about bass drivers, subwoofers, there is absolutely no difference where the subwoofer is aimed. The only difference you will have, slightly different transfer function, maybe cancellations in different frequencies, but it's not gonna matter at all. So your subwoofers, even if those subwoofers are 6.5s or whatever in the back, in the boot, it doesn't matter where you aim it. So very quickly summarize. In a two-way system, mid-bass drivers, 6.5s and 8s, you would want to aim them. In a two-way system, tweeters, you would want to aim them. In a three-way system, 6.5s, you don't have to aim them. Mid-ranges, you don't have to aim them. Tweeters, preferably you would want to aim them to have that top end if you want that. If you don't hear above 13, 14K, or if the air for you doesn't matter, you can have all the drivers off axis. The only thing with that situation, when you have your drivers off axis, for example, in pillars like that, you will have reflections that can negatively impact your sound stage. Now, as an example, we're going to talk about tweeter. Imagine this tweeter is aimed off axis like that. That means that it's playing towards that side, towards that window. Now, if it's playing full range up to 20K, and we assume that it's playing totally flat, because it is off axis towards me, I will hear it from the driver's seat up to 10, 11 kilohertz or so, and the top end up to 20 kilohertz, I will not be able to hear it. However, that driver is still reproducing those frequencies, and those frequencies are going across the car, bouncing off that glass and coming towards me as a reflection from the glass. And if we have exactly the same situation with that one, it's exactly the same. It's going there, it bounces off that glass and comes to the listening position as well. And what is happening with this kind of setup, that the highest frequencies, they are not precise and they are blurred. They don't have that very accurate center image because they're coming from different sides. They're bouncing, especially if it bounces from the windshield, it goes there, it goes there, it bounces from the dash, and it's a total mess. That's why it's always preferable to aim the tweeters towards you to avoid any possible reflections. Aiming towards you can be bad as well if you have a reflective surface close to the tweeter. If I'm gonna close the door like that, and I would imagine that this tweeter is a bit closer like this, what can potentially happen, and it happens a lot of times, that you have, let's say, 987 kilohertz coming towards you, but those frequencies are playing to the sides as well, and it's gonna bounce back from the glass and it's gonna come towards you, and you will have a dip in the frequency response. Not necessarily, but you can have a dip in the frequency response, which corresponds to the path length differences between those two waves, the reflection and the direct sound. So sometimes aiming that tweeter a little bit off axis might help because it's going to mitigate that reflection from the side glass. And as I mentioned in one of my shorts, car audio is a compromise. No matter what you do, you will compromise one thing for another. It is a highly reflective environment. You will have issues with the cabin transfer function, and it's just literally unavoidable. So now I hope you know what to do, when to aim, when not to aim. I hope this video helps. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.